Hi, um, welcome. I can see how many people are watching. I can't see who's watching, but I can see the chat. So, if anyone is out there, if you want to drop me a hi or whatever, gonna wait just a minute before I start reading. But I like talking, so I would love to talk. Basically, what I'm gonna be doing um, is I'm going to be reading a few stories and poems from my book, My Body Like Tentacles, which is available on Amazon. Before I do that, I do have some explaining to do. So this was supposed to happen last night, and I postponed it to today. And so my reasoning for that was that I really wanted to use my cell phone as a camera. Because it's 2022, I don't own a camera, I own a cell phone, and I couldn't figure that out. So you are getting the delightfulness that is an Acer Nitro webcam. And then about an hour ago, when I was hooking all my equipment up to my laptop and getting everything ready, my microphone broke. So you're getting the delightfulness of an Acer Nitro microphone. But I'm here. I'm doing my best. This is just how my life goes. Um, so yeah, I postponed for nothing. It's fine. Um, I'm gonna read a few excerpts. I have them picked out. Hello, Samaria, and hello to my Aunt Melinda. Thank you guys for joining me. Um, I, for those watching who don't know, obviously that's my Aunt Melinda. I love her. She buys all my books. She has since I was 13, and I self-published these awful, awful books. All my family has been very supportive. And then Samaria is my friend from college, and you'll see her name in the acknowledgments of my book because she helped me proofread and she went over my manuscript. She's pretty awesome. So I I have I think three pieces picked out here I'm gonna read. And I'll introduce them before I read them. Um, but the ones I'm gonna read the first half of Straw Dog, and I will give a reason for that before I read it. And then I'm going to read a poem called I Can See Ghosts, which I've not read before. And in this book, you'll see there's a mixture of pieces that I've already had published in magazines and things like that. And then there's some that haven't been. I Can See Ghosts is one of the ones that hasn't been. And I don't want to give you guys too many of the ones that haven't been, so that you have something new to read if you've been like a longtime supporter of me. So I think I'll also read Caves, which is one of the first pieces I ever had published. So you're going to get one of the oldest pieces that I've written, which is The Straw Dog, which I wrote my first semester of college. And then you're going to get the first piece I published, and then you're going to get a poem that I just wrote in the last 6 months. And so I think we'll do story, poem, story. Nice little flow to it. So we'll start out with The Straw Dog, which, like I said, I wrote my first semester of college. It's one of the first things that I submitted to Creative Writing Club. And all of my friends have had to reread this multiple times because I just kept rewriting it. It was originally supposed to be the beginning of a novel, and ultimately, I think one day it might be. I'm really considering using it for my senior thesis for my MFA. I still have a couple years to think about that. So essentially, what you'll have when you get a copy of My Body Like Tentacles is what would have been the first two chapters. And I've edited them basically into a short story so that I could feel like I finished it without finishing the novel because it took me a good 3 years to write those two chapters. So I'm going to read you essentially what would have been chapter 1, and then when you get the book, you can read what would have essentially been chapter 2, and it does kind of have a nice full circle, like, ending to it. But yeah, so we'll start out with that. An array of people filled the subway car. Next to the doors was an anxious-looking man, maybe 35, wringing his hands together as he watched the other occupants. There was a young woman with her toddler, taking turns playing on a smartphone game. Another young woman was gripping tightly to the pole, frantically watching every move the others made and flinching away from anyone within 2 feet of her. Elliot's headphones covered his ears, streaming music from his phone as he took in these fleeting moments of other people's lives. He didn't know a single person on the train, but in that moment, all of their lives intertwined, and he was the DJ putting a soundtrack over the scene. This was how he spent his Saturdays, people watching. He was on good terms with a few of the afternoon people, but the early mornings were always a dull blur of weary travelers who'd rather spend their morning with a warm bed and no worries. Elliot left the train at his regularly scheduled time of 9:30 a.m., spent 45 minutes in Starbucks, always ordering a tall vanilla latte, hot, not iced, and eating a slice of cheesecake. At 10:30, he boarded the underground going west, and at 1 o'clock, he would get off at the Midtown stop and go to the mall to eat his favorite pizza. He would walk 3 blocks down and catch another train at 3 o'clock and be home by 6 p.m. This was his routine, and he never strayed from it when his weekends came. His weekdays were filled with 9 to 5 repentancy, but even when you knew what trains to take and where to buy a coffee, you could never quite predict what a human would do or who would join you. It was another Monday. Elliot stood at the copy machine, listening to the faint buzzing of the machinery as he stared at the painting of a lily that hung above it. It puzzled him, that lily. He knew that the secretary had bought it at the local craft store for $20 and hung it up and enjoyed looking at it, but he was in a constant confrontation with it. Who painted that picture? Who sold it? Did they know that their painting was in this office, in 100 different offices, and in dozens of different states? Did they ever think about this painting, this lily, the day they painted it? Elliot! Elliot! He blinked and turned to come face to face with his coworker. Jack was the kind of guy who would appear in an Abercrombie catalog, Elliot thought. He had the body for it, perfectly ruffled hair, and seemed to perpetually have just enough scruff around his jawbone to get the attention of all of the office girls and a few of the guys, too. Elliot swallowed and let out a quiet, "Sorry?" "I was asking if you were done, Elliot," Jack said curtly, his voice clearly irritated. "The copy machine? Are you done?" "Oh." Elliot withdrew his papers in a hurried stack and stepped back. "Sorry," he repeated, retreating to his space in the back corner of the room, sitting down in his desk chair and tuning out the clacking keys of the office space. His own job revolved around cleaning up everyone else's messes, and he liked that. He liked organization and routine. He kept everyone else's files straight, handled phone numbers and address books, sent emails for his boss. He kept everything clean and clear and black and white, and as it was supposed to be. The wall filing cabinets in his corner were labeled and categorized and alphabetized and perfect by every textbook standard. His computer a digital store of the same information. He kept his quiet distance from his office mates, like he kept his distance from the people on the subway. Headphones in ears, mind on a quintessential oversight. A Polaroid camera lay on the desk alongside his computer and a framed picture of his siblings and him on a childhood Christmas morning. Weeks passed in this way. 5 days at the office, a day out and about, a day at home, repeat repentancy perfect. Perfect hell. Elliot drifted absently through black and white days and uneventful motions. He was indebted $50,000 on a college education for what? A 1-bedroom apartment, 2,000 miles between himself and anyone he'd known for the first 18 years of his life, an office job, a car he couldn't drive through busy city streets, and a goldfish. That was why, on November 10th, he decided he was done with it all. He took his normal Saturday route, watching people. His fingers tapped anxiously out of sync against the edge of the subway bench. His phone was stashed silently in his pocket today, as there was too much noise for his brain to process, and the music only made it worse. Fragmented conversations fell upon his ears, phone calls providing only half a story, and the fellow passengers making small talk. "Yes, honey, on my way. Do you have heading to Manchester? Look, Christy." He felt his lungs pick up their speed and pound against his rib cage. His eyes trying to take in the mess of people and colors and sounds. It was all wrong, the way the people moved and intertwined without a thought to the effects they left on each other's path. He was thankful when the train pulled into the 9:30 stop and he exited the station to step into the nearby Starbucks. Elliot's hands fumbled with his apartment keys in his coat pocket as he waited in line, listening to order after order and trying to recall the people he always saw in this line at this time. His memory, however, seemed to go blurry as he tried to ignore just how loud the establishment was. When it was finally his turn to order, the barista, a college girl with bubblegum pink ponytail and a set of angel bite piercings, whose name tag read Susan, had to repeat her greeting twice before Elliot could respond. Susan often worked on Saturday mornings when Elliot would come to the restaurant, but today Elliot found himself analyzing her, despite her familiarity. He wondered if her hair and piercings were some sort of rebellion against a name as common as Susan. He wondered if the have a nice days and how are yous and thank yous were genuine to her, or if she was only following workplace guidelines like most people did. Elliot, she said, do you just want your usual? Elliot broke out of his thoughts to stutter out an answer. He wondered for a moment. This was his chance. What harm would it be to mix it up? He ran his eyes over the menu that hung over the countertops, looking at everything and feeling a lump form in his throat as he opened his mouth in an attempt to order. No, he thought. No, it was not worth the risk of not liking. Yes, he finally said. Yes, the usual. Okay, Susan replied. That'll be $4.92. Elliot took his wallet out of his pocket and removed a $10 bill. Keep the change, he said quietly, stepping out of line to wait for his order. He leaned against the wall and continued reading the overhead menus, pondering his own fear of some unknown. As the minutes passed and he received his drink and his cheesecake, he found himself occupying the only empty table in the entire establishment, a small table beside the window that he managed to secure only once every couple of weeks. The underside was adorned with chewing gum, but he enjoyed the fresh sunlight and the view of the parking lot. He didn't feel much like eating. Admittedly, he hadn't felt much like eating for the last several weeks, but he felt a comfort in his normalcy. No, he could remember one moment that was not mundane. In the second grade, his best friend Danny Grimes had broken his arm on the playground equipment. This was back when people had first started getting sensitive about the everyday dangers that children had been facing for years. Danny had jumped off of the swing set. It was his own fault, and they all knew it. The real problem was that he collided with a screw in the sandbox. Getting a screw to the elbow, they said, was what damned the East District grade school playground equipment. Recess was contained to the gym for the rest of the semester, while safety precautions were put in place. An equal hell Elliot feared the teacher would one day go to for thinking dodgeball every other day was a good idea for kids aged 6 to 11. However, when Danny got back, it was the first truly nice day of spring, and when Elliot asked what he wanted to do, Danny insisted the only thing he wanted was to play on the burgundy swing set again. As the gym filled with flying red rubber and the screams of the third graders, Elliot and Danny snuck out of the back door and played on the playground. By the time they were caught, everyone was too relieved to punish them, and Elliot could easily say he had never felt such a rush of adrenaline as he felt that day, sneaking out of a grade school to do something that in his second grade mind was the equivalent to a heist. Ahem! He snapped out of his thought and turned from the window to the person standing beside his table. Sorry, he cursed in the back of his mind, angry at himself for getting so deeply lost in his own thoughts again. I asked if I could sit with you. It was a girl, probably a foot shorter than him. She had a shower of blonde hair that fell down her back and was every Hot Topic stereotype Elliot could imagine. Heavy eyeliner, black clothes, ripped jeans, tattoo choker. He swallowed and opened his mouth to reply when she cut him off. It's just that all the other tables are full and, that guy over there said something to me and I just wondered if I could sit here. Oh, Elliot nodded, and the girl slipped into the seat across from him, taking a sip of her drink. I'm sorry if this is weird, she said. I see you here every week. Elliot just nodded. Had he seen her before? He couldn't remember. The dull hum of 20 people conversing occupied his mind. Don't talk much? Elliot just shrugged, looking anywhere but at the girl. She had a pretty face. He didn't want to see it. Oh. She sounded almost disappointed, but Elliot felt like someone had dropped a cork down his throat, leaving his voice invalid. They sat in silence, the girl sipping on her iced coffee as Elliot sipped his own warm one. When his drink was long gone and the girl fumbling with her straw, he was almost scared to move. Should he say something before leaving? Should he ask the girl's name? She was worried about a guy, but what guy did she indicate? Should he make sure she got out okay? He jumped as his phone buzzed in his pocket. Digging it out, he saw the text from none other than Jack. everyone's favorite office worker. He internally rolled his eyes as he opened it. Hey, Elliot, I need the Casey file. Could you send me an email this afternoon? Thanks. He nearly scoffed at Jack's inclusion of the second L in his name, but before he could even scoff at such a trivial thing, he saw the timestamp. It was 10:36. Crap. He jumped from his seat and darted out the door. He could feel the eyes of the blonde-haired girl and the Starbucks customers watching as he ran out, feet slamming hard into the pavement as he moved. He tore into the subway station only to find the train was already moving. He threw his hands up and cupped the back of his head in disbelief. He hadn't missed the 10:30 train since he had moved to the city. Elliot's thoughts raced as he struggled to figure out what to do, how to make up for this brief interruption to a day he had so perfectly planned out. He simply sat against the wall and waited. He waited silently, watching for the next train to come, heading to the location he always occupied. He waited as people came and went and waited and watched and spoke and hugged and cried. He waited unwavering. He figured people probably thought he was homeless. One man tossed a wadded-up bill and a handful of coins at his feet. At some point, his headphones found his ears, and he shuffled through setting scenes of people meeting up and people leaving and people running to catch nearly missed stops. He told 1,000 stories in his head as he did so, trying to count the minutes that he wasn't on the train. By the time the subway doors slid open, he had lost track of the time. And that is where chapter 1 would have ended, so that's where I'm gonna end reading it. And if you want to finish it, you can get the book. And I think there's I don't know, 7 more pages that would have been chapter 2 to that story if it had ever made it to the stage of actually being a novel, if I could ever finish anything. Let's see. I see a couple more people joined. Hello. We're just doing some readings from the book. And if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to leave me a comment in the chat, and I will look at that here in a little bit. Let's see. Okay, so the next one that I'm going to read is a poem called I Can See Ghosts. And this one I wrote recently. I took a class where we had to do something called poetic memoir, and it was we were given some kind of prompt where we had to use something from our life, and we had to intersperse it with kind of breaks of fiction almost. And so I chose to base it on, this will make me sound crazy, but it kind of runs in my family that we're a little bit psychic, like we have dreams predicting the future. And this time when I was a kid, I told my mom that I was outside talking to a great aunt that passed away when I was an infant. And I just thought that would be a really cool concept to kind of a lot of the stories in this book, they are to do with chronic illness and mortality, and I feel like that is just something that has punctuated the last 6 years of my life. If you don't know everything that I've dealt with in the last 6 years, I've been chronically ill since I was 17. I had cancer, thyroid cancer. I have fibromyalgia. I just have a slew of problems. And so that concept of mortality has been just very much there. And it's something I've dealt with now, but for a long time I really struggled with. And so that was just something that I chose to explore with this prompt. And so that is where this poem came from. And like I said, I haven't read this one. I think next week the spoken word video for it will be coming out on this channel, but I've never done a live reading of it, and a lot of people haven't read it. So yeah, it's called I Can See Ghosts. When I was a child, I told my mother I could see ghosts. They played in our yard, and I set a place for them at our table. I said I spoke to my great aunt who passed away when I was a newborn, and told my mother she was keeping Grandma company in heaven. Really, I think kids are naturally kind of creepy, and I don't know I would be so chill if I had a kid and that kid told me they had talked to ghosts, but I don't know, maybe I would be. I'm telling you this because I think it explains my relationship with death. I've always accepted that he's coming for me, scythe in hand. My favorite song was Hey, 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 We're All Gonna Die by Jack's Mannequin. Like foreshadowing, the singer had cancer and I didn't know it yet, but so did I, and suddenly I was explicitly not ready. And I can hear the reaper laugh and curse me as I slipped away. I'd talked to ghosts and danced in graveyards, plucked violin strings on a grave and sang about death. Suddenly, going was terrifying. I was lucky. It was found by dumb luck and removed from my body. I was healed. Physically, I was healed. I was healed. But nobody tells you that mentally you're still 1 foot inside the casket. In the back of my mind, I plan a funeral while the rest of the world keeps spinning. They say that names have power, so I hide its name from the rest of the world, like naming it will give it life and allow it to possess every inch of my body. They said the doctors were good and God is good and I am lucky, and that is supposed to be enough unless you are in that situation. I guess I could seem more grateful that I too should praise God and science. I do, but people never realize you can be grateful and mourn at the same time. Just as I can question, but find peace in silent moments of prayer. Just like I can have the most bittersweet luck. Just like you can talk to ghosts and also find them terrifying. Maybe if I did have a child and that child told me they had been talking to their late great aunt in the backyard on a random summer day, I wouldn't actually be scared. Maybe I'd tell them that I also saw ghosts, and whether or not I am talking about an actual person or a metaphor is up for debate. There are ghosts which haunt the walls of our home, those that howl in the night and keep us awake. Of course, there are ghosts which haunt the walls of our body, which wrap themselves around our organs, squeezing out every thought. I think about these ghosts often, both the good ones we hope watch over us, and when I say I'm afraid of ghosts, obviously I mean the malevolent ones you see in movies. But I also mean the ones you can't see, the ones that occupy your body and mind, the kind that lay dormant in your own organs for years, untraceable until you rip them out. When I look at the scar on my neck like a smile, I can see the grim, grinning ghosts that once held on for dear life. I can also see the life that now lives because that ghost was torn away, an eye for an eye. I have to wonder if we did the right thing or if we tainted the memory of something that once was. I saw a therapist once for a couple months and mostly we sat in silence. One thing I learned was that you're supposed to be more of a non-believer than a Haley Joel Osment. When you tell your mom you talk to ghosts, she says you have a big imagination. When you tell a doctor you talk to ghosts, they want to give you pills. They don't exercise ghosts. They just try to convince you that ghosts aren't real, and maybe they're right, but I kind of think we need to be more at peace with the things from the past than just erasing them. And really, this is just a long-winded way of saying that I think ghosts are probably real, but I also think they're a great metaphor for mental illness. And I think maybe if we respected the metaphor of ghosts as much as we respected haunted dolls, we wouldn't be so afraid of them. And maybe we need a Ouija board for the metaphor type of ghosts. But really, I think my version of that was writing this poem. So thank you. It's very awkward to read to a live stream instead of real people. So the last, I said I was going to read Caves, and now I don't know if I want to read Caves. Let's do a couple more. I'll read Caves, and then I'll read a short one for you. How about that? And like I said, if anyone has any questions for me, whether it's, I don't know, about anything I've said, about any of my writing, about the book, anything, feel free to ask that in the chat, and I will respond. And anyone that came in after the start and was like right smack in the middle of this, this will be up on my YouTube channel after it's done. You can go back and watch anything you missed. So the last one that, oh, my Aunt Melinda said she liked that story. Thank you. The last one that I think I'm gonna read, long one at least, is Caves, which has previously been published in Chronically Lit magazine, and it was one of the first ones that I ever had published. And this story is very special to me. I started writing it when I had my thyroidectomy. This was years ago. And it was heavily inspired by a song called Caves. And I submitted it to a creative writing class, and this guy told me that it sucked and that no one would publish my writing. And I said, won a bet, and I submitted it, and it got accepted into the first magazine I sent it to. And that was a huge, huge part of making me want to pursue my degree in writing. I'm going to start my MFA in writing in fall. And a huge drive for that was the fact that I was told, hey, you suck. And I said, no, I don't. And yeah, so I always say I owe a lot to that man. Um, no idea where he is now, but that was definitely a turning point for me. So I think caves is very much a huge part of why I am where I'm at today. It was, not only a coping tool for dealing with that difficult time in my life and the illness I was dealing with, but it was also just this catalyst for everything leading up to where I am now. So it's been published. A lot of you may have read it already, because it's available for free online, but it had to be included in this book just for what it is and what it means to where I'm at in my career. And so I'm going to read that one for you just because it's kind of like my baby. Okay, so here's Caves. Humans love to believe that it's going to get better. Her lungs had been the first thing to go. She couldn't venture up a flight of stairs without a 5-minute break to catch her breath. Still, she'd said she was fine. When her coughing fits overtook her sentences and her best friend begged her to go to the doctor, she insisted it was just a bad cold. Next was her stomach. There wasn't a food she could keep down, so she stopped eating. Everyone said she needed to keep her strength up. She needed to eat. She was losing too much weight. She said it was a stomach flu. It wasn't until her throat closed one day, when the pain became unbearable and her heart felt frozen, that she accepted she might not get better. The ladies in their maroon scrubs were nothing more than robots. They filled the empty hallways with the sound of acrylic nails clacking against plastic keys. The lady at the check-in desk had mousy hair and loudly chewed bubblegum. Name? Her voice was as monotonous as the beige walls. This woman knew that names didn't matter. They were nothing more than appointment slots and room numbers and bills to be paid, and the woman was so sorry. Everyone was always so sorry. It was funny, she thought, that people were so sorry over things that were so minuscule, things you wish you could be the only thing. The sorry people weren't facing the doctor today. She was, and she knew it was all a charade of hollow sympathy from someone who had worked in this field long enough that they were unable to offer any real emotion. The doctor, with his slicked back hair and cardigan, were like a sailor dropping swear words off the deck of his ship. The word he said felt like some strange new profanity, a word that once had a completely different meaning but was now so vulgar it must be avoided at all cost. It was 2 letters longer than the long forbidden C word, but warranted the same gasp. She felt like a ghost. A human's first instinct is to survive. As a young woman, if a man comes toward you in a parking lot, are you more likely to survive if you pepper spray him or if you get into his car? And when you find out that your body is destroying itself, do you kill it first or do you wait for your lungs to stop working? The car ride home dragged on much longer than its 10-minute duration. The radio shuffled through pop hits, upbeat tunes about heartbreak and pain and loneliness. The Billboard's Top 100 was a misery factory, blared through car speakers across the nation. She didn't cry, not in the office or in the car, or even once the door was chained and her shoes were off. She felt hollow, like she was watching her life on a movie screen and not through her own eyes. Numbness spread out from behind her eyes and down through her legs as she lay atop her bed sheets. Her arm draped over the side, allowing her husky dog to lick her fingers. It was winter, but her ceiling fan spun overhead. She wanted to feel something, even if it was just the feeling of air blowing on her bare skin. She imagined the fan being a clock, spinning out the rest of her life as fast as it could, while it still had the time. It was closing in on her like crumbling cave walls, blocking her from the outside world. Time was something she had always worried about. They have support groups for these kinds of things. The pamphlet was pea green, The front bore the words supporting, caring, helping in white letters. She knew this helped some people and it was what you were supposed to do. There were a lot of things she was supposed to do. Go to therapy, call her sister, pick out a wedding dress, become a mother that she just never saw the time for. There was always a better time than the present, but now that the present was presented as the only promise she had, it seemed like it was far too late. The electronic signature pad lit up, and as she filled out the required paperwork, she felt like she was signing her soul over to some high-tech devil in a pantsuit. She tucked the brochure into her purse as she was called back. She was directed away and led by a woman much older than her. The ceiling seemed cavernous, twisting and turning through a maze of hallways. The nurse was gaunt and silent, like a white-dressed reaper leading her through some tiled-floor afterlife, humming the entire way. They boarded the elevator, and she began to wonder what the likelihood would be for the cords to give out and plunge them down deep into the pits of hell. They exited, and she followed to a small 10 by 10 room, barely big enough to hold a table, a bed, 2 chairs, and a monitor. She was instructed to strip, and as she did so, the cold, sterile air made her shiver. The floral printed gown they had left behind for her hung from her frame like her father's old shirts. The nurse returned to hook her up to the machines, tentacles wrapping around her skin and attaching to IVs and TV screens. The needle pumped ice-cold saline into her bloodstream, stinging her veins like freezer burn up her arm. A couple painful shots of compazine were added to the mix until her heart slowed and her eyelids felt heavy. She dangled her fingers against the side of the hard hospital mattress, imagining she was back home with her dog licking her hand. The grinding wheels of her suddenly moving bed jolted her eyes open. The spinning sound of the bed dragging against the tiles echoed through the hallway. The walls were dark, cave walls crumbling in on her, with lights swinging overhead like stalactites. Her claustrophobia was kept at bay somewhat precariously by the drugs in her system. They moved her onto a hard table, a half-dozen scrub-clad people surrounding her. A man told her to count backwards from 10. 10. There is a theory that every single action we take leads to every single thing that happens to us for our entire lives. Some go as far as to say every single choice creates a new dimension of never-ending possibility, all the different ways a life can play out or get cut short. Something as small as leaving your bed a few minutes late or what you choose to eat for lunch can change the outcome of an entire day for you and everyone you encounter. Even just a single word can determine what you think, feel, or do for the rest of your life. 9. She wondered what she had chosen to get here, to this moment. What these people had done that led them to working here. Why her and not someone else? 8. Do you kill your body or do you wait for it to destroy itself? 7. And that was Caves. I think we'll do one more because I feel like I read like well, I cut off the happy part of Straw Dog. If you want to be happy, you have to buy the book. Sorry. Um, but then I feel like I read like depressing poem, depressing story. Uh, I am happy sometimes, guys. Happiness doesn't sell, unfortunately. So I think we'll read one more that I also kind of wrote recently. I think it's going to be the last one I read. It's pretty short. Um, if you have read CenterLit magazine, the print issue, this was just featured in that, or if you watched the recording of that magazine launch, I read it there. Um, it's it was it's kind of a nostalgia piece. It's called Fireflies, and it is based on when I was a kid. That used to be one of my favorite things was going outside and chasing fireflies and catching them. And we used to like catch them in jars and bug catchers and that kind of thing, or just in our hands. That was we really loved doing that. I think all my siblings loved that. And I wrote a piece very similar to this years and years ago, I think back in high school. And it was going to be part of a fantasy book that never came to fruition. And I revisited it not too long ago, and I was like, I'm going to turn this into its own little thing, its own little happy slice of life flash fiction. I took a flash fiction class, and anyway, so it's really just a cute little nostalgia kind of thing. It's called Fireflies. The hot summer wind blew gently over the field, swaying the prairie grass. The boy had just turned 5 in the spring and was barely visible as he ran through the overgrowth, his giggles the only indicator of exactly where he was. Mama sat in an old wooden rocking chair that occupied the front porch, humming as she tried to keep an eye on her children darting in and out of the porch light's glow. "I caught one, Mama, I caught one!" The girl, older than the boy by 2 years, capped the mason jar in her hand and began running toward the porch, brunette pigtails swaying behind her. The boy huffed, his chunky fingers clasped tightly around his own jar as he watched his sister climbing into Mama's lap and showing her the jar. The old screen door opened and Daddy appeared, slinging a dish towel over his shoulder as he came to stand beside Mama's rocking chair to look at the girl's catch. The boy rubbed his strawberry blonde hair off his sweat-dampened forehead and peered out into the field, farther away from the porch light. The prairie grass grazed the bare skin of his shoulders beneath his overalls, itching as he tumbled through the field. He was now completely out of the porch light's glow and waited for Mama's voice to call him back closer to the house at any moment. However, her call never came or did not reach his ears as he kept going. He tiptoed the best he could, trying to keep from stumbling too much and scaring the bugs away. He squinted his eyes as he caught sight of the little glowing golden light hovering just about the prairie grass a few yards away. He took a deep breath, tiptoeing until he was closer to the creature, and leaped. He landed on the ground with a thud, eyes closed and scared to look at his jar. He must have laid like that for several minutes, and as he heard Daddy calling his name, he finally opened his eyes. The jar, plunged down against the dirt, was emitting the soft golden glow like a lantern. The boy's eyes lit up just as bright as he dug it from the earth and covered the opening with the jar lid, and he realized something unexpected. "I caught 2!" he screamed, arms raised in triumph as Daddy reached him and ruffled his hair. He was hoisted onto the man's shoulders and carried back to the front porch, watching the bugs in his jar. They would set them free in just a few minutes, but for now he felt triumphant as he and his father sat down on the porch steps to join Mama and the girl. "Oh, you're a mess," Mama said, her face falling as she saw the dirt that covered his overalls and face. "I caught him, Mama, just like Sissy." With a sigh and resignation to the boy's mess, his mother chuckled. So that's the end. Yeah, I don't know. You guys want me to read one more? I have one more poem I could read. That's not sad. I'm trying not to read any more sad because I didn't say this book was going to make you happy. So I have a poem in here that is also quite old. I think I'll read. And after that, if anyone has any questions, I'll answer questions or I'll end the live stream. I don't know. So if you have any questions, now's a really good time to throw some questions in the chat. Because I think this might be the last one I'm going to read because this book is very short. This is a chat book. So, this is another old one I wrote, and I think this would have been 2017, maybe 2018. Not positive. One of those years. I was still working on my associate's degree when I wrote this one. And when you get the book and you read the preface, I discuss that this chapbook kind of covers 6 years of my life, and that's basically the 6 years I spent working on undergrad, which are also 6 years of me dealing with chronic illness, which is why that is such a prevalent theme of the book. But this one actually has nothing to do with that, and it came from I went to a concert, and it was a concert for my favorite band, which I reference in the other poem I read. But he made a comment that I just thought was very relevant uh, to everything um, just going on in the world at the time, and it still holds very relevant today. Um, and it was just a beautiful, wonderful concert. It was themed after Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which made it even better. And I wrote a poem, and it's in a much different style from my other poetry, which you can tell that it was older, just because my other poems are much more free verse. And this one was actually written for a class, which was another reason it was written in this format. Um, so it's a little, you can tell it's different from the other poems, but I love it. I love it so much. Um, so many people I know love it. The people that were in my classes wanted me to include it. So I included it. I'm going to stop talking about it and I'll just read it now. It's called The Neighborhood. His canvased feet create a beat, a poor man's closet filled with stories, monogrammed sweaters draped on hooks or on skeletal shoulders too thin to touch. Stories will not be told of Constantine or her hair the color of daylight, when ivory buttons produce a song of Converse and tattoos and red solo cups. There's a story behind her and one behind him. We have never met as we dance in assigned seating with no political agenda. The floor vibrates from surround sound. Speakers quote the speaker. Tonight we are neighbors. If we sing together, what can't we do? And I think that's a really good stopping point to end on. That is something that has stuck with me since, since I went to that concert. It was just a very relevant quote, and I think it was 2017. So it was very much about the political climate of, you know, 2016 into 2017, where no one got along. It was a mess. But I think still today, I think it's very relevant. I think it is, yeah, it's just something that stuck with me, and I wanted to include it in the book for that reason. So, um, Samaria asked why death hurts all the time. I wish I had an answer to that. For me personally, and you'll see in the book, I I have a very weird relationship with death. Um, I'm not going to read it now, but when you get your copy, there's a poem in there called "The Lost Generation," and it kind of addresses this crazy time we live in right now, where I feel like so many of us have gone to so many funerals and lost so many people. And it seems like, and it's not even just COVID, it just seems like it's just been a weird couple years. Um, and I don't have an answer to that. I wish I did, but it's just something that you kind of have to learn to deal with, I guess. Um, and I've kind of been battling with that myself since I was 18 and had that whole mortality crisis going on, as 18-year-olds do. Um, but I think it's just part of life. Um, Thank you, Lucas, and thank you for uh, tuning in. And thank you, Samaria. I'm at Samaria. I really appreciate that you helped me with this book. Um, yeah, so I think I'm gonna end the stream here. I had a good time. I love talking and I love reading my work. I am very proud of it, which is something that took me a long time to get to the point where I could say, yeah, I'm proud of it. Um, So thank you for everyone that tuned in and watched, and thank you to anyone um who is gonna watch um after the live stream when this is just up, recorded on my YouTube channel. Yeah, My Body Like Tentacles. It's available on Amazon. There's if you go to my website, there's all kinds of links on there. It's available as an ebook. It's available as paperback. I will also have copies. If you do buy a copy and you send me like your receipt or a proof that you purchased or whatever, I have these bookmarks. If you want a bookmark that kind of has my face on it, I'm mailing them out to people. I don't have that many, so it's kind of like a first come, first serve thing. Because I have to order more before festival season. So that's another thing. If coming up, if you want to get a copy directly from me and you haven't already contacted me about it, I will be at a couple events coming up, and I'll have those on my Facebook probably. So yeah, thank you again to everyone who came and listened or who's gonna tune in later and listen. I really appreciate it, and I will talk to everyone later. Bye.